A New York surgeon is accused of savagely beating and sexually assaulting his model girlfriend and keeping her locked away as his sex slave, and then using his medical practice to hide the evidence. It's an incredibly disturbing news story that we're going to break down for you right now. I honestly don't even know where to begin with this case. I guess the best way is, let me just lay out this sentence for you. A New York plastic surgeon who has offices on Fifth Avenue in New York, in Manhattan, is accused of mentally, physically, and sexually abusing his model girlfriend and allegedly turning her into a sex slave and then covering up physical evidence of that abuse through filler treatments. Process that for a second, because these are the wild claims in a new lawsuit that was filed out in New York by 25-year-old model Maya Willow Sias, and this is against 40-year-old doctor Amar Mahmood. So I am going to read you the opening paragraph in her complaint, in her lawsuit. It says, quote, "Over the course of 9 interminable months, Dr. Mahmood, who ironically is a well-known plastic surgeon, physically, mentally, and sexually abused Willow. After dating Willow for a brief period, Dr. Mahmood convinced Willow to move into his apartment at 325 Fifth Avenue in New York City. He then implemented his plan to exercise more and more mental and physical control over her through various forms of seduction, coercion, intimidation, violence, and on many occasions, the use of psychotropic drugs. In short, he turned her into a sex slave." And as evidence of this horrifying abuse, she embeds in this complaint extremely gruesome and graphic photos. I don't even want to say a black eye, because that's not what it is. It's swollen. It is purple. There appear to be bruises on her lips, her arms. The pictures are so disturbing, we're not even going to show them to you. But here's the backstory to get you a sense of what's happening. So if you check out the website for his practice, Alina Med Spa, out in Manhattan, it reads, "When under the care of Dr. Amar Mahmood, you can expect elegant, beautiful results. Dr. Amar specializes in regenerative cosmetic procedures and brings a rare level of experience and knowledge to the field of aesthetics. His warmth of character and genuine dedication to his patients has led to a loyal clientele who appreciate world-class results." The website lists that he has a bachelor's in biomedical engineering, that he graduated medical school from St. George's University, that he's a board member of the Anatomical Clinical Research. He's an associate professor at SUNY Downstate Medical Center. By the way, we also checked him out on Truthfinder. We plugged in his name and location. And aside from some of the information that we mentioned, no criminal history that we found. But here is the backstory of Dr. Mahmood as laid out in the complaint. So Saya says she met Dr. Mahmood at a yacht party in Miami back in April of 2023. And then she comes to New York later that month, and she goes on a date with him. They go out to dinner, and they start a brief relationship right after that. And it's when she says she moved into his place that she, quote, "soon encountered Dr. Mahmood's dark side and monstrous temper." She said that he would drink, that he would take the psychedelic party drug 2C, that he would take ketamine, other drugs, that he would have sex with prostitutes and would force himself on Sias. And a big theme in this complaint is that he would sexually assault her, including when she was unconscious, and that he would force her to participate in non-consensual sex acts with other people, strangers, including, she says, prostitutes. She claims that on one night she found him in the apartment with prostitutes. She demanded that they get out, and then she says he proceeded to violently attack her, throwing her to the ground, punching her, smothering her face with a pillow. She ended up losing consciousness. She alleges that as a way to keep her from going to the police, Dr. Mahmood would keep her imprisoned in that apartment, monitoring her movements through cell phone activity, that he threatened her life if she left. She claims he even supplied her with antidepressants and ketamine to keep her compliant. And this is the allegation that is truly next level, as if everything I just said wasn't disturbing enough. And yes, these are allegations, but disturbing allegations nonetheless. She claims that instead of allowing her to treat her injury, and namely here she's talking about a broken orbital socket, he used plastic surgery to cover up the evidence of the abuse, that he took her to his office, that he injected her with tear trough fillers, and she said, in quote, "in a display of calculated cruelty, he didn't even administer anesthesia." She called the procedure excruciating. She then claims that in October of 2023, she finds Dr. Mahmood with another woman in the apartment, and both the woman and the doctor proceeded to beat her up. She says she called 911, but, quote, Dr. Mahmoud, through a combination of seduction and intimidation, quickly convinced Willow to retract the call, which she did. Sias claims she was finally able to escape in December of 2023, that she suffers from PTSD, psychological trauma. Her modeling career has suffered tremendously. Now, again, these are allegations, okay? He has not been found liable. As we know, everybody is innocent until proven guilty or, until proven liable. Here, the standard of proof, of course, in a civil case is much lower. But I want to talk more about this. And I also want to talk about if this could potentially lead to any criminal charges. So for that, let me bring in criminal defense attorney Adam Conta to talk more about this. Adam joins me on set. Adam, good to see you. Thanks so much for coming on.
Great to be here.
Just initial thoughts. I mean, my gosh, what a lawsuit.
In this day and age, it's hard to be shocked by these type of allegations anymore, but this is shocking. And it's such an appropriate preface to what then they lay out as the allegations here, because this is a level of depravity that's out of a movie. I mean, it's so shocking. It seems corroborated by both pictures and text messages that were taken at the right times to sort of add a level of truth to this. You don't know until you get in there and you start seeing the discovery, but the allegations are really disturbing. This is a uniquely terrible case that is really coming to light in a shocking fashion.
I've been covering the Sean Combs case for the last year, and I am still shocked about these photos and what I saw. And again, we're not going to show them. Everybody, you can look online, and there's different outlets who are reporting them. We're not going to do it. But the photos, I don't know how you get past that. I don't know how you say this didn't happen, unless, what do I go back to? What was it, the Johnny Depp Amber Heard trial? It's makeup. They're manufactured. They were caused by something other than that. Unless I don't know how you argue against that.
I don't even know if you can do that, because in that trial there wouldn't have been evidence of broken bone to corroborate it. Here, what we're talking about and what you described as being an excruciating procedure is he didn't just give her a black eye, which is insanely swollen, shut, and dark in the pictures, but he shattered her orbital bone. So the procedure you described is even more horrific, because it said that he put in the hypodermic needles, no anesthesia, scraping. She could feel it scraping on the bone fragments as he was cruelly just trying to fill the damage he had done. But I say that because there should be evidence of a broken orbital there. Along with those pictures, along with the timeline, it just makes it really hard to envision that this would have been either staged for the purpose of this lawsuit, or certainly even harder to believe that it would have just been makeup, as the allegations were in the Johnny Depp trial.
Do you believe she has consulted with doctors and medical professionals to document that these injuries were real before she filed this lawsuit?
I think so.
Yeah, because
I think any attorney who had this come into their office, the first question is going to be, after, are you okay? Are you safe? What medical history do you have? Have you gone and seen a doctor? If you have not, you need to go from my office directly to do that.
And talk to me about, there wouldn't be surveillance footage in a medical spot like this. I believe there could be HIPAA violations, right?
Well, there could be, though. I mean, there wouldn't be cameras in the operating room, but we're also talking about people who are willing to do potentially this kind of damage on someone. So those aren't people who are operating within what we believe are normal norms of society. Who knows if they've got hidden cameras? That's not an allegation, but even in a medical facility where there wouldn't be cameras facing in on the operating room, there would certainly still be plenty of cameras in and around the waiting room, watching people come and go. That's almost standard. But if I had to guess, because it's their spa, because it's Dr. Mahmoud's spa, I'm going to guess that security footage doesn't exist.
But if it doesn't exist, that makes him look really bad.
Sure.
But there could be footage, and talk to me how expansive this could get in a lawsuit like this. Footage of her entering the building, footage of her exiting the building?
Forget the building even. We live in New York City, right?
Yeah.
And I've been practicing criminal law here for 20 years, civil law for a lot of that time as well. And we have watched as a society, grainy security footage, which is pretty unhelpful, to now everything is in 4K HD, security videos are everywhere, cameras are everywhere. I think if they start digging, it depends on how long cameras can be kept. A lot of places erase after 30 days, but there's still potentially opportunity to find video surveillance that shows her coming and going from maybe even back to his apartment. You know, so there could potentially be video cameras that lay out sort of their entire path.
Talk to me about that alleged 911 phone call that she called, but then he, convinced her to hang up. There has to be a report of that, right?
Mm-hmm. Yep, there should be a Sprint report that outlines that it came in, and that it says that she took it back right away. I don't know what that means. She would have had to have called back, I guess, and said, I made it up. But even in those instances, a lot of times police are still required to show up in a welfare check. So that's one of those allegations that's laid out in the complaint that I think we just need to know more about, but there should be a record of it.
Unless she called but never spoke to them. Right.
Unless she never spoke.
And they're like, hello, 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 and she just never answered.
But the way the complaint says, the way the lawsuit says, is that she retracted it.
Yeah.
So if you retract it, to me that means that you put it out there to someone.
Yeah, interesting. Talk to me about the potentiality of criminal charges here, because my understanding is if you're looking at the facts here and you look at these allegations, these would be crimes that could still be brought. There's no statute of limitations issue. They're not time barred. So rape, assault, criminal sex act. Talk to me about what you think might be happening there.
Sure. Governor Cuomo extended the statute of limitations back in 2019. So now we're talking about a 10-year for lower level rape in the third degree and 20-year statute of limitation for the larger ones, the ones that these would really be contemplated by. So there's absolutely no statute of limitation issue. And yes, they absolutely need to be worried about criminal charges. Dr. Mahmoud absolutely needs to be worried about criminal charges. Think about Harvey Weinstein. Did that start with a criminal case? No, it started with Ronan Farrow doing an investigative report that outlined really heinous details of how he treated women in the film industry. And that piqued the interest of both the LA DA's office and the Manhattan DA's office. You look at what's happening with Diddy right now. That didn't start with criminal charges. It started with lawsuits. It started with a lawsuit, I believe it was Kim Porter. No, sorry.
Cassandra
Ventura, sorry. And so that's how these things often start. They start by the piqued interest of really detailed, heinous lawsuits that then get the notice of the DA's offices. And listen, if you were in a small town, maybe this wouldn't lead to something larger. But you filed a lawsuit now in the district of New York County, and you have the New York District Attorney's Office there. And that's not a normal district attorney's office. They have more resources and more investigative power than almost any other entity in the world. And that's not hyperbole. They really have the ability to both investigate and prosecute cases that no other office in the country has. And so something like this that comes along that's so egregious and seemingly has all the evidence already laid out, this isn't even a difficult case for them to investigate.
But there are situations where somebody could be sued for sexual assault and yet they are not criminally charged, even if charges could be brought, not as if there was a statute of limitations issue or a jurisdiction issue or something like that. What would be one of those reasons if we don't see criminal charges here?
Maybe she doesn't want to cooperate criminally. Maybe her goal is to be financially compensated for the horrible time that she went through, and she has no interest cooperating with the district attorney's office. That could make it more difficult to prosecute him. Maybe some of the medical evidence that we sort of are assuming exists does not. There could be contradictions in her story that we just don't know about yet. And there could be a number of reasons that make a prosecution more difficult and ultimately not viable. A prosecutor's job absolutely should be not just to look at a complaint, but to evaluate the evidence and decide whether they believe they have enough evidence to prove this case beyond a reasonable doubt in front of a jury. And if they don't feel like they can do that, then they should not bring the case. And we just don't know enough here to determine whether or not that's the case or not.
That's a good point. I do want to address exactly what the causes of action here are, what the claims are. So she is suing under New York City's Gender Motivated Violence Protection Act. This is something we've talked about before. This is the same thing that Combs' accusers have sued him for. It would be violence committed against her because she is a woman, that there is this animus that the doctor has against women. Intentional infliction of emotional distress, that could be kind of broad, all-encompassing action. Negligence, not just against him, but his medical practice, Alina Medical Spa, because the allegation is the company had a duty to ensure that all the medical treatments and the procedures were performed in accordance with medical standards and practices. So those are the causes of actions claim. What stands out to you? What do you think about those?
Let's go through them. The first one, gender-motivated violence against a woman. In order for that to even be a cause, you have to have committed what's equivalent to either a felony or a misdemeanor in state law. So by them even filing that as their first action against him, they're saying that we believe a felony has been committed here, or a misdemeanor, quite honestly what she lays out. This is felony assault. So they believe they have enough evidence to show that he committed felony assault here. The second one, intentional infliction of emotional distress, she lays out pretty clearly not just the anxiety, the claustrophobia, the PTSD. They're all causes of action, again, that stem from this felonious action. And then the third one I think is interesting, and this is really the heart of the lawsuit. The first two are the reasons why we're here, but the third one, the negligence, is what's going to take us to where we're going, because that's the one that ties in the spa. That's the one where you get the money. The other ones you can sue him personally, but once he brought her into his clinic and performed illegal, non-consensual surgery on her, now you have the clinic and the business on the hook as well. And if we're speaking not just in terms of empathy and what's right or wrong here, but the actual ability to get compensation through monetary damages, that's where you're going to get the most. And that's why that one is so important here.
I'm glad you mentioned that, because she is suing not only for compensatory damages, these are damages to make somebody whole, but she is suing for no less than $10 million, and also punitive damages, a way to punish, attorney's fees, and also an injunction, prevent him from seemingly ever contacting her again. $10 million, what do you think?
I think that's an opening offer. You know, I mean, there are plenty of lawsuits that I filed that also I have put down $10 million expected damages, or what we're seeking. It doesn't necessarily mean that they believe that the case is worth $10 million, but it's saying, listen, we think this is a serious case, and you're going to have to really pay if you don't want this to go to trial, and this is where we think we want to start at. So there are plenty of cases where maybe you'd ask for $1 million, $500,000. But to me, this is just saying, we think this is extremely serious. You know this is extremely serious, and if you want to talk to us about anything other than a trial in this case, this is where we're starting.
There was an interesting part about this complaint that I wonder how expansive it could get, because she claims that she is not the only victim of Dr. Mahmoud. She claims that he has, quote, a long history of abuse towards women. And she put this in there to prove the gender-motivated violence claim, that this is a general animus he has towards women. And she cites how his ex-wife claimed that he beat, raped, and abused her. Little side note about that, the Daily Mail reported that Dr. Mahmoud sued his ex-wife for defamation several years ago, calling her claims, quote, outright fabrications. I don't believe anything has really come out of that legal action yet. It does make me wonder, though, if she's calling this out to say, if you have evidence against him, if you're a victim, come forward, testify. You know, you might be a key witness in my case. You see that before in those kinds of lawsuits? Like, I'm not the only one, as a way to get people to come forward?
Absolutely, absolutely. I mean, the main ones we just talked about, right? Weinstein and Diddy. Right. It starts with one, and that opens up a space where victims feel safe enough to come forward, and they finally feel as though they're going to be believed and heard and validated. And, you know, you mentioned the prior lawsuit, his ex-wife. I took a look at that. I mean, it's very similar allegations. Rapes, beatings, using a pillow to smother. That's a specific act that seems unique enough to be this particular individual's modus operandi, not just sort of a general, you know, you don't really hear about us smothering people with pillows that often. There were some really, really terrible allegations in that, and that's been going on now for 10 years. I think that was filed back in 2014. But again, it seems to be that they're laying out that this person has a real pattern of abuse, and they're absolutely going to be looking for more victims to count as well.
And that evidence can come into a trial, right? Episodes that aren't directly related to Messias, but that are kind of you said like a pattern in a way.
I mean, criminally, if this went forward criminally, it's called what's called Molyneux evidence. And probably everyone remembers that was a big part of the Weinstein trial. It's why, in large part, the verdict ultimately got overturned, because some of that was inappropriately allowed in, at least according to the appeals court. Here, it depends on how close it is to the current allegations. It's pretty close. And would it be used to just prove he's guilty, or would it be used to show that he sort of has a pattern in his abuse? And that would be up to a judge to decide. The courts have sort of reined Molyneux back in, especially since Weinstein, and said, you know, you really got to be careful admitting this type of evidence. But this is so spot on. I think a defense attorney could have a tough time keeping it out.
And in a civil case, it'd be easier to get this kind of evidence in, you think?
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, here's what's interesting. So he hasn't responded, reporting indicates he hasn't responded to the summons. He hasn't filed an answer to the complaint, but apparently he told the New York Post that he would fight the lawsuit and that he unequivocally denies all of these allegations. You mentioned a little bit before you were representing him, what would you do?
You know, this is it's a tough call, and I don't want to be callous about how horrible these allegations are.
Sure.
But if you look just in a vacuum and you see a lawsuit like this, I think you pay off immediately, unless you're really innocent, unless you have such a wall of evidence to show that this is a fraudulent lawsuit that should never have been brought, and this woman is just trying to shake you down. If there is truth to this, you are not now just worried about your business. You're not worried about bankruptcy. You're worried about going to jail for 20 years. And so if any of this is true, if the broken eye is true, if the black eye is true, then he should have paid her off before this lawsuit even hit the courts.
If he knew about it.
If he knew about it. I'm guessing that someone reached out to him.
The thing is, though, is if he really did do this and he pays her off, it could be the Sean Combs situation, because he settled the Cassandra Ventura lawsuit the day after it was filed. Everybody else came out, right? And if there really are more alleged victims of Dr. Mahmoud, I imagine the same thing could happen.
Well, this is an interesting one. The difference, though, between Diddy and Dr. Mahmoud, right, is that Diddy had 25 years of parties that were notorious for their nature, their sexual nature, famous for who was there, and on camera. And so there's so much material and content surrounding Diddy's actions, his alleged victims, and who might have been there, that there are just so many more eyes on it. Dr. Mahmoud right now just has this one person that we're focused on, and the ex-wife, but we don't know about how that relates here, right? Sure. And so I honestly think the key to this case right now is the prostitutes. Because this seems to me like an American Psycho almost situation where he was bringing in prostitutes and doing horrible things both in front of them and to them. And so if he's going around New York City and he's having these quasi-orgies with 3 prostitutes and this other woman, and they're beating up her, they saw what happened. There should be witnesses out there. And so I'm the most curious if some of them come forward as both victims or witnesses and how that affects the case.
And you could subpoena them and
absolutely
compel them to testify at the trial. Interesting. Wow. Really disturbing case. Trying to make sense of this. Again, after covering a lot of sexual abuse claims over the past year, this one still shocked me based on what we were seeing and what was being alleged. Adam Conta, thank you so much for coming on. Really appreciate it.
Thanks for having me.
Awesome.
Love being here.
All right, everybody, that's all we have for you right now here on Sidebar. Thank you so much for joining us. And as always,